Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a little trip to the vibrant, bustling streets of Naples, Italy, because we're going to reverse engineer an absolute marvel of culinary architecture. We're diving deep into the incredible engineering behind Naples' famous shell-shaped pastry, the Sfogliatella. And trust me, this isn't just your everyday baking. This is a complete masterclass in patience, precision, and serious structural integrity. We're going to break down exactly how this masterpiece is built from scratch and really get into the mechanics of how all those dough layers work to create that iconic, shattering crunch.
Okay, let's just get right into it. I want you to imagine a single pastry crafted from literally 100 paper-thin layers of dough. It sounds almost impossible, right? Well, this is a technique that Neapolitan pastry chefs spend months and sometimes even years perfecting. It's this incredibly intricate, high-stakes process where every single layer has a very specific structural job to do.
To figure out how this 100-layer marvel actually works, here's our roadmap for today. 1. Origins of the shell. 2. The 100-layer secret. 3. The creamy core. 4. Pastry pitfalls. And finally, 5. A taste of Naples.
Section 1. Origins of the shell. The Santa Rosa Monastery.
So the story of this pastry actually kicks off in a pretty unexpected place. Way back in the 17th century at the Santa Rosa Monastery, right on the stunning Amalfi Coast. Legend has it that a highly resourceful nun created the very first version of this by just throwing together some leftover semolina, ricotta, dried fruit, and sugar, and wrapping the whole thing up in some thin dough. It was completely an invention of practicality and, well, patience. But as time went on, that recipe made its way over to Naples, and that's where generations of bakers really went to work. They meticulously refined it, transforming this simple monastic treat into the highly engineered, iconic shell shape we know today. Now, it's an absolute must-have Neapolitan experience. It's this beautiful morning tradition kept alive in the city's oldest pastry shops, and it's almost always enjoyed warm with a perfectly brewed espresso.
You know, the name itself kind of gives the whole secret away. Sfogliatella comes from the Italian word sfoglia, which translates to thin leaf or layer. So the name is literally making a promise to you. It's a guarantee of that signature, super delicate, shatter-crisp architecture.
Now, a quick heads up, if you ever find yourself wandering around Naples, you're going to see two main varieties of this pastry vying for your attention. First, there's the Sfogliatella frolla. This one's made with a much softer, delicate short crust pastry. It's totally delicious, but structurally speaking, it's pretty straightforward. And then you have the Sfogliatella riccia. This is the one defined by its crisp, flaky layers of sheer architectural perfection. And for this explainer, we are fiercely focused on the staggering engineering and construction it takes to actually pull off those 100 layers of the riccia.
Moving on to Section 2, the 100-layer secret, mastering the dough.
All right, here is where the absolute magic happens. And let me tell you, it's a solid 5 to 6 hour commitment. First up, you have to create an incredibly strong, elastic dough using bread flour, water, salt, and just a tiny touch of honey. That elasticity is totally non-negotiable. Once it rests, that dough is rolled out into a sheet that is, frankly, terrifyingly thin. Then the entire sheet gets generously brushed with softened butter, or if you're keeping it traditional, lard. And this is the real secret right here. That fat acts as a literal structural barrier. Without it, the dough layers would just mush right back together into a dense clump. Next, this massive, paper-thin sheet is rolled tightly onto itself into a cylinder, capturing all those separated layers, and it gets chilled until it's completely firm. Finally, that firm dough cylinder is sliced into little rounds. The baker then uses their thumbs to very gently push and stretch the center of the round outward, sort of telescoping the layers out into this stunning three-dimensional shell. And they have to do it without tearing a single leaf. It is just pure, unadulterated craftsmanship.
Section 3. The creamy core, ricotta filling. So, what exactly is inside all that shatter-crisp exterior? Well, it's a perfectly engineered core. Remember those monastery origins we talked about earlier? We still see that influence today. This filling isn't just a simple cheese mixture. It actually relies on fine semolina cooked down with whole milk until it gets beautifully thick. Why? Because that semolina creates a dense, stable structure so the pastry doesn't just completely collapse while it's in the oven. Once that semolina base cools down, it gets mixed with incredibly rich whole milk ricotta, some sugar, and eggs. And then comes the flavor bomb. Candied orange peel, pure vanilla extract, fresh orange zest, and a really nice hit of cinnamon. All of that comes together to create this super smooth, creamy, highly fragrant interior that is the absolute perfect counterweight to that dry, crispy shell.
Which brings us to Section 4, pastry pitfalls, common mistakes.
Look, when you're dealing with 100 delicate layers of dough, the margin for error is practically zero. One wrong move, and the whole balance is destroyed. If you get impatient and roll the dough out too thick, you completely lose that signature flaky shatter, and the pastry just ends up tough. If you skip the resting time, the gluten won't relax, and the dough is going to aggressively snap back, or worse, tear right when you're trying to shape it. How about getting a little too generous and overfilling the shell? The steam will expand inside and literally cause those delicate pastry layers to split and explode in the oven. Not great. Underbaking is going to leave you with this pale, sad pastry instead of the deeply golden, crisp finish you want. But honestly, the most tragic pitfall of all is using watery, undrained ricotta. All that excess moisture is going to seep right into your perfectly engineered 100 layers, leaving you with a soggy, totally ruined interior.
And finally, Section 5. A taste of Naples, the sensory payoff.
Just picture pulling a tray of these masterpieces right out of a hot oven. The intense heat has completely transformed the architecture. That layer of lard or butter has melted down, essentially frying those paper-thin layers of dough from the inside out. The pastry comes out deeply golden, surprisingly robust, and just beautifully crisp. To finish the whole thing off, it gets a super generous dusting of powdered sugar that settles perfectly into the little ridges of those dozens of layers.
Because really, all of this crazy complex engineering leads to one undeniable truth. That first bite is absolutely unforgettable. The delicate shell literally shatters into dozens of crisp, buttery layers in your mouth, almost like glass, before immediately giving way to that soft, dense, creamy ricotta filling. It's such a deliberate balance. You get the crunchy, airy lightness on the outside and the rich, fragrant heaviness on the inside, hitting you with citrus, cinnamon, and vanilla all at exactly the same time. It's a total masterpiece of texture and flavor working in absolute harmony.
So now that we've completely reverse engineered this 100-layer marvel, I've got to leave you with a question to think about. Knowing all the sheer craftsmanship and science that goes into it, which Sfogliatella would you actually choose? Would you go for the highly engineered, flaky, shatter-crisp architecture of the riccia? Or would you play it a bit more comforting and opt for the soft, delicate pastry of the frolla? Or, honestly, are you kind of like me and you just have to find an excuse to try both? The streets of Naples are waiting for your answer. Keep exploring, keep questioning how things are made, and hey, thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.